Welcome back to the shop, everybody. In today's episode, what we're going to do is get the fretboard glued on to the Reinhardt neck, get the body down to my finish guy and pick out some paint, and then later this afternoon, we'll try to get the neck carved as well. We'll start with getting the fretboard glued on, and since we used Ridgelight, we won't be able to use an ordinary wood glue like Type Bond Original, which is what I typically use. We'll have to use epoxy to bond the fretboard to the neck. I'll start by getting some registration pins set up to make sure our center lines stay lined up. Then we'll get it clamped down, and then while it cures, we're going to take the body down to my finish guy. I've already got a few coats of vinyl sealer sprayed on, got it sanded down nice and flat and level. So we'll take it down to him, get a nice color picked out, hopefully a nice metallic silver, possibly something along those lines. After the epoxy cures on the neck for several hours, then we'll come back and I'll show you the specialty jig that I had built that's going to help us with the neck carve. So let's go ahead and get going. I don't know if you could tell from the footage, but that whole experience of getting the fretboard glued on is always a little bit of a hairy ordeal, simply because, you know, I'm fighting the 5-minute set time of the epoxy, making sure the center lines stay lined up, then getting the clamps on, making sure nothing moves. It's always a little bit sketchy, but we did manage to get a nice, good join all the way around. All the seams look good and tight. So now it's time to get the fretboard trimmed down flush with the neck. A lot of folks will use a router for that operation. I'm not too keen on it simply because you risk chip out along the fret slots. So what I'll do is use my edge sander, get everything sanded down nice and flush there. Now the only thing is the edge sander can't reach up through here where I've got this tight radius on the upper part of the headstock. I'll sand up as close as I can, then just use a router for that little part right there. So I greatly minimize any risk of chip out. So let's get going and I'll show you how all that works. Now that we have the fretboard trimmed down flush, the next step is to get our headstock to proper thickness. We'll take it down to a 1/2 inch thick. And what I'll do is I actually set up a fence on my oscillating spindle sander. We'll cut most of the waste off with the bandsaw. We'll finish it off with that spindle sander. Let's go. got the fretboard flushed up with the neck, it's time to carve. And I know there are a lot of builders out there who say that this is their favorite part, and you get this image in your head of, you know, the old woodworker with the great beard and the apron, and he's laboring over the neck, and I guess I'm an outlier. I just don't enjoy that process. So I use a jig that was designed by Bill Shelton up in Canada, Canadian breed guitars. It uses a flat platen that rides over a router bit and a router table, and then a cradle to hold the neck. Then at either end of that cradle is a shaped puck. And depending on the shape of that puck, that will then impart the shape to the neck. And there's math involved and all kinds of equations, and you know, I'm not going to try to explain them here, but it works really well. It gives me great repeatability on neck profiles and neck shapes. So what we'll do is we'll get the neck set up in the cradle, get everything set up on the router table. I'll hand do the transitions from the heel and from the headstock. I'll do those on my spindle sander. So by the time we get done with all of this, we should have a completely done neck ready for frets and then finishing. So let's get to work.
Ever been really happy with yourself after a great day in the shop and then realize you forgot something?